Welcome to Occupations, the podcast, where we discuss what it's like to hold specific jobs. Occupations is brought to you by lotsofmaps.com, where you fulfill your vintage map gifting needs. Visit lotsofmaps.com.
Hi, and welcome to episode 22 of Occupations, the podcast. Today we got a great guest for you. His name is Bryant Phelan, and he's a friend of mine, and he's talking to us on the phone from Little Rock, Arkansas. Welcome, Bryant.
Hey, how's it going? Happy to be here.
Bryant is a handbag designer. So he's going to tell us a little bit about design, maybe a little fashion that's in there, maybe some colors, and he deals with leather, I know, mostly. We're going to find out all kinds of stuff, and we're going to have a great education here. So, Bryant, tell me a little bit about, I guess, your bags. I mean, let's talk about the bags right off the bat. We all know what a handbag is, and we all know what a designer is. So why don't we talk about what you're designing?
Well, for me, I kind of approach handbags a little bit differently. I remember growing up and seeing my mom. She always had really cool shoes, and they were always very interesting. But the bags were always, black, brown, blue. And she probably had like the cooler ones out of what was available. But I remember asking her, like, where are the crazy bags? And she just said, they don't really make really interesting bags like that. So I really wanted to take what I saw as art, being applied to footwear and make handbags and just go from an interesting point of view, have some level of expression, something that really represented a facet of a person's personality and what they wore in terms of a bag, instead of just something so classic or so everyday, I guess, that we saw so many people carry. I mean, I think growing up, we all know what bags our moms or grandmothers carried, and they're all so similar. So I try to approach accessory design and handbag design with fresh eyes and with a different point of view. I grew up in a small town and in the South, so we really didn't have like a lot of fashion or art around us. And I'm actually very thankful for that, because I feel like when you do grow up in a larger city, you end up kind of being dictated, like, what is art, what is fashion? And for me, I kind of just had to come up with it myself, which I think allows me to have a unique point of view.
So a handbag would be considered a certain size, right? Is there a specific size you shoot for, or are you kind of dealing with different sizes?
There's so many styles out there. I just kind of use handbag as this umbrella to cover anything from like a clutch, a crossbody, a tote, a top handle, backpacks or satchels. Anything really is a handbag. It is a bag you're going to put your hand on at some point, I guess, So,
right.
To be totally honest, I've never really looked at a definition of it. I do know that some of the ladies that I sell to have gone on to me for calling them purses, because apparently purse is not as nice as a handbag. So they definitely want to be wearing a handbag.
Got you. And that makes sense. So I'm glad you're dealing with different sizes and different styles. First of all, your bags are absolutely stunningly beautiful. I've been watching you post stuff on Facebook for years, and of course I've gone to your website to check it out, and it is amazing. It's Phelan handbags. Phelan. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's good.
And it's OFAOLAIN.
Yes, that's right.
And that is the website. You can go to there and take a look at some of the stuff. And we're going to have some of his bags on our website because they're just phenomenal. You're going to really be blown away by the styling. So, Brian, so why don't we start at the beginning? You talked about your mom and bags. Were you into art at that point, or when did you start to feel art was a path for you, or at least a passion for you?
A kind of funny story. I never really saw myself as an artist. I was always very creative. I would just use that term because it kind of applied to just anything in my life. I like to approach things from a different point of view. And I guess people said, oh, you're creative. So I was like, all right, neat. But as I got older, I noticed that people would tell me, it's so lovely that you're creative, but it's so sad that, you're going to lose some of that imagination as you get it to be an adult. And I found that so disheartening.
Yeah.
So I held it really close to me through everything that I've done in life. In that I think that, keeping your childish enthusiasm and imagination alive is the most important thing. And you can apply that in any facet of life. So growing up, I was a creative kid, and I loved making things. I liked taking things apart, sometimes to my parents' dismay. But most oftentimes I could put it back together, which I think is the main thing, right? So
Yeah.
it was very fun just working with my hands and just coming up with creative solutions for things. And handbags kind of made their way into my life a little later, actually.
You have to have some skills taught to you, I would imagine, because some of the stuff that you're doing is really intricate. And I would imagine you've got drawing skills and things like that as well, and color skills too. I mean, I don't know.
Actually, I am a pretty terrible sketch artist. I think I could probably I can draw a handbag. That's, that's pretty decent. And color, I never really paid attention to any kind of idea about color theory or anything like that. I just kind of put things together that I liked, and I always just the same way when I buy clothes or anything for myself, I don't get something unless I love it. And then once I have accumulated many things that I love, they all just kind of work together. And that's kind of how I approach design as well, is if I like this pattern together with this pattern or these colors together, then that's what I go with, because so much, like I said, about art can be dictated to us. And I just feel like authenticity is the most important thing you can have in art and design. And the more you lean into your own feelings and I guess creative ebbs and flows, the more you're going to end up with an authentic product. And I really want to make sure that I am not, one, taking from somebody else, and two, that I'm representing myself the best that I can. And I really don't follow fashion for that reason. I love music. I'm very inspired by music, nature, dreams, architecture, and fine art. Those are kind of the places where my brain starts kind of going, oh my gosh, how does this translate into a bag, even if it's just a feeling? And that's kind of where I begin. But I actually was not ever taught anything about really art or design. I just taught myself along the way. My undergrad I did in psychology and interpreting for the deaf. And then I did a master's degree in biostatistics. I was a cancer researcher for many years and did my master's and PhD in epidemiology. Left my PhD pretty much like a year before I finished it in my day job in 2014 to pursue this full time, because I had gotten into leatherwork as a kid, and it started just becoming a brand organically over time. So my first real experience with falling in love with leather, I really didn't know that I was falling in love with leather. But my parents, we really didn't have a whole lot growing up. But when I was probably about 5 or so, we took a trip to Dallas, which was a big deal, to see the Phantom of the Opera. And I absolutely fell in love with the masquerade scene. I loved all of the different masks. And as time went on, I think I was probably about 9 or 10, 11. My mom had come home from either an antique store or something like that, and she had found this antique Venetian masquerade mask, and she had it mounted on this frame and put it on the wall. And I was completely obsessed with this mask. A couple years later, I really started to kind of, I guess, explore my creativity a little bit more in photography and some other things, but I would constantly take pictures of this mask. And finally, I got up close enough to it to realize that it wasn't plaster of Paris, which is what I was used to seeing and knowing about masks. But it was leather, and it was painted in all these beautiful colors. It's fantastic. I actually have it in my studio today. And I realized, oh my gosh, this is leather. And I always thought leather was my dad's church shoes or a couch. You know, I didn't
Right.
realize it was like this beautiful medium that you can work with. So I saved up my literal coins, and I went. My dad took me to a local feed store. We grew up in like a farming community, and I bought some scrap leather from their saddle repair, and I would paint it with some acrylic paints from Walmart.
Hmm.
And but first, I would draw the design on the back of the mask with a pen or a Sharpie, cut it out with an X-Acto knife, and then I'd paint it.
Hmm.
And I just started making these leather masks as like a 12 or 13-year-old. So it
Wow.
was very weird, I'm sure. But my mom's friends started really liking them, and they would occasionally buy them when they came to our house and they saw some. So I realized there was some business aspect behind this medium.
Right.
And both my mom and dad were small business owners. My dad is a pharmacist and a Southern Baptist minister. And my mom was an audiologist and also a speech pathologist for a school district. So they were both very entrepreneurial and very constantly busying themselves with things. And I find myself being that same person. And I really kind of fell in love with just the idea of making things and turning it into a business. So I started making little bracelets and just odds and ends like that. By the time I was maybe 16, 17, I realized I had expensive taste and I couldn't afford these bags and things I was seeing that I liked. And I realized how much I really liked case design and bags. And I was like, oh, wait, these are made out of leather.
Hmm.
This is what I work with. Maybe I could make some. So just started some trial and error with making bags around that time. And it developed into really kind of a secret hobby for me at that point. Because when I moved to Little Rock from my small town of Malvern, Arkansas, I felt like, I was in a big city, and I felt kind of, embarrassed of these things because I never saw myself as a designer. It was just something that was fun. And I kind of was in my mind thinking I have to pursue science to make a living.
Hmm.
And I had a friend over one day, Sergio, and at the time, my bathroom was where my closet was. I had a very, very small apartment, and he was in there forever. And I was finally just like, Sergio, you okay? And he was like, yeah, you can open the door. So I opened the door, and he's on the floor with all of these bags I had made. And this is all hand stitched, hand cut, everything that he had gotten out of my closet that I had like hidden away.
Hmm.
And so he had gotten in there and found them, and he was like, what the hell is this? So I kind of had to like come out as a handbag designer, I guess. And I was like, oh my gosh, nobody was supposed to see that. And he really liked them. And I just thought that they were, not good at all. He ended up saying, well, hey, I took pictures of these and I've sent them to a friend of mine who's a model for these designers in New York and all of this.
Hmm.
So I was completely like just terrified by this entire idea. And next thing I know, I'm getting cold called by my now very dear friend, Kato Momalu, who is Project Runway All Stars.
Hmm.
She's absolutely fabulous. And she called me and she was like, hey, you're the handbag guy. And I'm just like, yeah, I guess so. That and I work at PF Chang's, whatever. So she was like, hey, we're doing a show down at this bar watching me on All Stars because it was just coming out at the time.
Hmm.
She said, I want you to come down and I want to meet you. So I went down and I met her and we really just clicked. I mean, immediately just hit it off, and she liked my work. This is probably, I'm going to say summer 2013.
Mm-hmm.
She said, show up this time at this place next February in New York, and we'll debut your collection at New York Fashion Week.
Oh, man.
And that was just so beyond anything I could ever have imagined. I was just like, that was like a dream as a kid, but one that I never thought would ever happen, because I truly did not see myself as a designer. I had just gotten a sewing machine that could sew leather, and I made my first collection. Thank you, Mom and Dad, for the sewing machine, by the way. I think that they finally realized that I was not stopping with this. And they were like, okay, well, if he's going to be doing this, let's help him out. So they did get me my first sewing machine, and I'm forever grateful for that, because my imagination and my ideas, I have a lot of them. And the longer I spend working on one, the more bored I get with all of it. So being able to produce at a faster pace really allowed me to truly kind of spread my wings, I guess, as they say.
Mm-hmm.
So I made my first real collection at the end of 2013. And a local museum called SE Purse Museum, ESSE, they are one of two purse museums in the world. And one of them is here in Little Rock, Arkansas. And it is one of the coolest places ever. Anita Davis owns and runs it, and she is absolutely magical and does so much to support local art and community. But she bought my first collection to sell at their museum store, and that check is how I afforded my leather and all the things and travel up to New York for Fashion Week that next February. So I went and I debuted my collection, and the management team there liked my things enough that they offered me my own independent show at New York Fashion Week the next season. So by the end of 2014, I was showing, independently there at New York, and that was just absolutely bonkers to me. As at the time I was in at a master's program for biostatistics and working as a cancer researcher. So I'd be taking take-home tests on the plane and doing research while I was in the hotel room. So I really didn't have a lot of time to enjoy the frivolity of, being in New York during Fashion Week.
Yeah.
So, but it was a very, very interesting time. And I'll never forget Kato after our first show there in February. She said, hey, I don't really want to make a big deal about it, but it's my birthday, and I kind of want to go out. Do you want to go and grab a drink with me? And I said, it's my birthday too. I didn't want to tell anybody either. And so we turned out to have the exact same birthday. So now we're birthday twins. This is wild.
That's amazing. That is an amazing story. But obviously you're doing something right. And, there was a little luck on your side, obviously having a friend that discovered you and having a connection to somebody. But that's probably because you were good. You obviously have a lot of talent. It's surprising to me that you have zero education in art, which I think is wonderful. Have you avoided education in art? Was there a reason why you just sort of wanted to figure it out yourself?
As far as fashion and design in that respect goes, there was really nothing available to me close by. And I was very intimidated by artists because to me, they hold so much power in just their independence and their freedom of thought, and just the way that they worked with the world. It was a little anti-society in a lot of ways. And in my upbringing and the way that I was approaching education in life at the time was very structured and ordered. And that had served me well, for so long. So stepping outside of that and looking at, ever calling myself an artist was just kind of not only a pipe dream, but just something that I just really couldn't find myself very comfortable with. But I loved and respected artists. I thought that their fervor for life and just the way that they lived and their confidence in their own being and self was something I would never have. I mean, to this day, I really don't have a ton of confidence about being some prolific artist. I do have confidence in my skill, and I have a passion and a love for what I do. So I think that that's really all it takes. But from the outside looking in, it's so daunting.
Yeah.
And I do remember in undergrad, I did take some art courses that were kind of completely different than what I was doing, just because I kind of wanted to dip my toe in and see what that world was like. and I was able to talk some professors in my undergrad into letting me into some higher level art courses because I was not seeking a degree in art. I was just very interested in the field. And I would show them my work with leather and say, look, this is what I do. I'd like to see what your medium is like and maybe how I can incorporate things that I learned from you into mine, and maybe even bring some of what I know into your courses for the students that are getting involved there. So, for instance, I took a couple of semesters of furniture design, and that was so interesting to me. And ironically, wood and leather are so similar. I know it's like a harder surface, but once you put a hole in something, you chisel something, you make a cut, you put a finish on it, it's done. There's no going back. You can't create the material again, like with pottery or with paint and some other things. Same with leather. If you put the hole in the wrong place for a stitch, it's there. You either
Right.
got to dress it up with a pretty rivet or something. But it ended up being really eye-opening, and I had an incredible instructor, Mia Hall. She just really approached art in such a wonderful way, because when I would say, do you like this? Is this good? She would say, how do you feel about it? She would never try to like take my hand and lead me to what art was or what it should be or what I was doing wrong. It was really so much based on skill and on knowing how to use the right tools or inventing a tool for what you're trying to do, and really trying to take whatever your imagination was and bring it into tangible reality and say, that's correct, and never really judge based on what kind of art it was or what direction you're going or where your inspirations came from. It was about how well did you achieve your own goal? How well did you bring your own imagination to life? And that was just a beautiful way to be taught art. And I had never come across that before.
Well, and there is no such thing as wrong in art, right? I
Right.
mean,
Yeah,
it is what you feel that it is, and you do what you feel.
for sure.
Somebody says to you, you know what, it would be better if you did this. Well, okay, that's your opinion, but that's not why I did it. It's to be
Right.
better. I did it because that's the way I envisioned it.
Exactly.
That's
It's
great.
so true. And I just, I had friends even that were like, they were in fine art because I was friends with a lot of artists. And some of them would really gatekeep art in a way that I just thought was honestly ironic that an artist would be gatekeeping art. And I had a couple of people, one in particular, who literally would tell me without any prompt, what you do is not art, right?
Wow.
And I would just be like, well, I feel like it is because I have a point of view and I'm trying to come from an inspired place. But they just saw what I did as not just a craft, but I was creating a product to sell.
Mm-hmm.
So they looked at that as going, you're a business selling a product. You're not an artist creating a work. And for me, I just was like, man, who cares what media it is? Like, before people could do this, that, or the other with, some mediums that we have today that are very prolific, like called art now, like the cost structures or whatever, that are these giant, 3D printed things. That material and that method didn't exist. So how does anybody really sit back and gatekeep what is or isn't art? It really just, it has to come from a place of, inspiration and have some sort of point of view. And I think that that's art.
I got a really strange question for you.
I love strange questions.
Any inspiration from the science and the research that you did? Is there any correlation between those two?
Yeah, absolutely. If you look at viruses under a microscope, a lot of them are beautiful. Like the shapes and that they take, it's otherworldly, and it is amazing. And those kinds of things inspired me to think about bag design and approaching it in a way that's like, okay, well, sure, we've made this shape of bag forever. What's one that we haven't made? Like, how can I approach this from a point of view that still a useful object, as I believe handbags should be, but it's also a novel design. And it comes from an approach that maybe someone in the fashion industry doesn't have. So in those ways, science has definitely inspired a lot of, not even just specific design, but particular ways of creative thinking and problem solving too. A lot of problem solving.
Do you design based on a need?
Yeah.
You did say that you don't see bags in this size or whatever. So is that fire you up and say, okay, I'm going to make something that size?
Absolutely. Yeah. I love doing things that, just are just totally out of pocket. Like, what in the world are we thinking? But I think I have a picture I posted on Facebook maybe in 2013, actually. I think it might have been 2013, 2014. And I made a mini handbag. It was so small. I mean, it like the little chain like went around my finger. It was very tiny and just ridiculous. And if you remember when I think Lizzo wore a little mini Valentino bag to some award show, the world went crazy for these little micro handbags. And now these little handbags are popular everywhere. But that was something, that I thought of a long time ago. And I'm not saying like, ooh, I came up with that design. I think that as creatives across the world, we all kind of have our antennas up, and a lot of us can be on the same wavelength at the same time. But that was definitely a moment where I was like, why don't I make something that's just so small it literally can't hold anything? Like, it's just stupid. And so like that's like one example. But otherwise, like in terms of need, I've also, fit people's wheelchairs for, certain kinds of bags that they might need to carry their particular medications or durable medical equipment in, or whatever. But so I like working with people with what they do need. And I also like making things that people never thought they needed.
Sure. Let's shift gears, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Let's talk about the actual work that you're doing with your hands. Tell me a little bit about what it takes to physically make the bag. Let's say the design is already predetermined. What are you physically doing with the leather? You obviously have to cut it and all that, but why don't you walk me through how you start with leather and you end up with a bag?
Sure. Yeah. There are really actually so many steps, and it's always interesting when I have somebody over to my studio and they say, oh my God, you have so many machines, because people see the end product as being a bag, and largely people think you cut a piece of leather or pieces of leather and then you stitch them together. And that's kind of that. Or maybe you attach hardware. But it really is a very in-depth process if you're wanting to make a very fine leather good. To start, of course, you pick your leathers. You're going to cut your pattern out. And then to keep the sides from becoming really bulky, because like with my designs, all of mine are also lined with leather. So if you're thinking about the side of a bag meeting the front of the bag, that's the outside of the bag and aligning the side, and the outside of the front and the lining of the front all together. So it's 4 pieces of leather you're stitching together there. That can become very bulky very fast. So you skive the edges. And what that means is that you essentially bevel the back side of the leather so that the front of the leather is not touched, but the back is thinned out just on the edges as much as you'd like, or that makes sense with your design. And doing that allows you to create a thinner edge. And having a thinner edge kind of comes into play a little bit later when we talk about edge coat. But once you have your leather skived, you put a crease down the edge. So best example is if you've seen watch straps, you know how beside the stitch, there's a little line that is kind of indented into the leather.
Yeah. That's not just design. There's actually a function for that.
Yeah. So it actually compresses the molecules. And I guess this is a place where my science comes in as well, but it compresses the molecules of the leather on the side of the piece that you're doing. So it helps that skiving process take even another step towards not just being thin, but also compacting those molecules so that they stay strong and they're not flimsy. And it also is a bit of a design element in that they make electric creasers or heated creasers of varying widths. So as you go down the side, you can put that line in multiple different places. Some people do it before they stitch so that they can put their stitch along the edge and use it as a guide.
Mm-hmm.
And some people do it after. It just depends on kind of your style. I tend to do, well, I kind of do a little bit of either, just depending on how much I'm paying attention that day, I guess. But putting that line down the side is just it's a nice decorative touch. It lets you know you have a really fine finished product there, and also serves a bit of function as well. After you've creased the leather and you've skived the leather, then typically you're going to be cutting out and interfacing. So there are materials that are used between the lining and the exterior of the bag. And you can use a thicker, harder interfacing, like a salpa, which is essentially a bunch of scrap leather has been blended down to dust, and then it's been made into kind of a hard leatherish substance. And that creates a more rigid structure that you'll see in bags. And then the softer bags use like a microfiber lining, and those can range between 0.5 millimeters to 1 millimeter, 2 millimeters, whatever. You can put the interfacing in, or if you have hardware that you need to put in before the interfacing, you do that. So for instance, there's a clutch I'm working on right now. I've done the first steps, the process for the leather. The lining is a lambskin. It's a very thin material, very supple. So it will show anything behind it. I'm talking a grain of sand. It will create a little mound there.
Wow.
So I don't want any of the back of my hardware for the bag to be going through the interfacing and then with the lining put on, because you'll see it through the leather.
Right.
So I put the hardwares on first that need to be put on. Then I put on my interfacing on the interior. I glue it down with a non-toxic water-based glue. And that way, once it hits the interfacing, you can't see it on the other side. So it allows the interior to really be very smooth and unobstructed with kind of like a line of sight, I guess, with any kind of visual imperfections. So once you have the interfacing glued in, then you can glue on the lining. And some designs require you to leave some portions of the lining unglued, so you can put things in between the linings and the exteriors together. I know this sounds very complex, but it can get really crazy. I guess let me stick to this clutch design for simplicity. So with this bag, I then will glue on my lining after the interfacing is on. So now I have the exterior, the interfacing, the lining, and the hardware all completed on this bag. It's been skived. It's had the little groove put around the edge. And at that point, I start edge coating. A lot of people will stitch first, and then they'll put edge paint on. So if you ever look at the side of a bag and you notice, I think one of the most kind of iconic ones is Louis Vuitton, which largely does not use leather. They are a vinyl bag.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at their bags, they typically have kind of a reddish line down the sides of their bags. And that is called edge coat or edge paint. So that makes the multiple layers of leather look like one solid piece of leather. So you can match the color of the paint to the leather to make it seem even more that way. I like to go with a traditional black with most of my designs. And you're probably going to be putting on 3 coats of that, maybe 4, depending on how thick the side is. But you'll paint on that edge paint, and then you'll sand it down, paint again, sand it down, paint again, and rinse and repeat until it looks perfect and you cannot tell that there are multiple layers of leather between there. Once you've got the edge coat together, then you can stitch the bag. Or if you've done a design that you stitch up first and then you edge coat, then that's what you do there.
That's fascinating.
So it's quite interesting. And I'm kind of looking at some of my bag designs right now. So I'm sorry. I feel like I kind of got sidetracked a bit. But there's so many ways to put together bags. And the steps and some of the processes are different.
Right.
With each one. But for the most part, just to be very, very simplified, you cut the leather, you attach hardware, glue down interfacing, you glue in lining, you stitch the bag together, you put edge coat on, And then you do any kind of finishing work you need to make it look very nice, whether it's waxing the leather, polishing it down, cleaning up the hardware that you've gotten dirty with your grubby hands working with it all day. So
I was going to
that kind of
say,
thing.
yeah, it must be a dirty job. How do you keep the bags and the leather nice and clean if you have dirty hands? How do you do that?
you are the sacrifice. You are the what is it? The tribute. So I was actually just talking to one of my friends the other day, Haziah, and we were talking about how I have like a section of my wardrobe that is literally, it's a couple of shelves of just leather working clothes. And when your hands get dirty, whether it's with this paint or whatever, you can just wipe it on yourself and save the bag.
Nice.
So you end up with very dirty fingernails. And I like jewelry. It's kind of like my one thing that I really like to, splurge on, I guess. And I am so embarrassed constantly if I'm in a jewelry store or something. I'm like, oh, I'd like to see that ring. And then like they look at my hands and they're like, get out of here, I look so filthy. Keeping the leather clean also kind of depends on the type of leather, but keeping your surfaces very clean is kind of how you do that. And making sure your hands are dry, which stinks during the winter because your hands are already kind of dry. So you end up with cracking and stuff in your skin. But if you have oils on your skin, then it will transfer directly to the leather. So many types of leather don't like that.
Yeah.
So you just have to kind of keep your hands as clean as possible, keep your surfaces as clean as possible. Some people wear gloves when they work with leather, but I just feel like it takes away from my tactile senses working with it, which in my opinion keeps me from connecting with the material and making the best product that I can. So I rarely have a bag that I've gotten dirty. The one time, and actually this has happened this year, like there will always be times when you make a mistake no matter how long you've been doing this. I wasn't thinking, and I had stitched a bag in a white stitch. And then afterwards I went, oh, you know what? I'm just going to put a coat of wax on this just to add a little bit of a shine to it. And I didn't pay attention to the applicator that I was applying it with, but the last thing I had waxed was a darker leather. So it dyed my stitches like a gray on the bag. And I was just like, are you kidding me? So when you have a choice there, either you go, yeah, I meant for that to be gray, or you literally unstitch every stitch and then restitch it in all the same holes, which is what I did. It is a pain, a huge pain, but I want to make sure that the products that I offer are of the highest quality that I can give. So it's not the first bag I've had to completely unstitch and restitch. And you really do have to hit all of the same holes as you go, because if you add any new ones in between, it can cause it to break and fray and for the leather to come apart. So if you're taking the level of quality down from your product, then like you don't do it.
All the steps that you just talked about, how many of those steps did you miss when you were first making bags?
Oh my gosh. What would I do? I would cut a bag and then I would cut the lining, probably not well, and I would stitch those things together. So I would literally cut and sew is what they would call it.
So no finishing on the edges or anything like that?
Oh my God, no. I didn't even know what that was. I'm sure I sound like the Little Mermaid when I go into the leather store. Even today, I'll go in and I'll say, hey, what's that thing? It's like a little dingle hawk that, it makes a little groove on the side of the leather that you put your stitches in. And my friends, at Tandy Leather, wherever they're just looking, be like, an edge groover. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that sounds exactly like what that should be called.
Oh, that's great.
But
you live and learn, right? You trial and error, right? And you learn what things are called as you go too. That's pretty great.
For sure. And I'm still learning. I mean, there are literally things that I've been working with for years, and I've never thought to even ask what they're called. If I go into a store, if I, or see it, I'm like, oh, that's what I need for that. That does this thing. and I think about it in terms of like its purpose.
Mm.
And I get it now, and then I'm like, what was that called? How do I even look this up? For years, I was kind of like grasping for straws about what I was even working with myself. I used just a bunch of random stuff I'd find. And honestly, I really suggest doing that because it allows you to be a creative problem solver, and it allows you to use things in ways that other people would not tell you to, which can end up being, kind of a beautiful thing.
Mm.
A lot of people say, like, with art, mistakes can make an entire design, make an entire career. It's
Absolutely.
true. I mean, I use so many tools in the wrong way, quote unquote, than what probably the leatherworking community would use them for. But the way that I use them is perfect for what I'm doing. And some of the hardware that I've used, people are like, oh, I love that you use this hardware for this. I never thought about that. I'm like, I didn't think about using it in the way that you and everybody else says I need to, because I wasn't taught. So it lets you kind of create your own tools, create your own way of designing, and that leaves kind of a fingerprint on everything that you do, and people can tell you apart from somebody else because somebody else isn't going to be doing that.
Right. I live up in Massachusetts, and there's a place up here called Woodman's, and they are known for fried clams.
Okay.
And that's the place where the fried clam was invented. And it was all a mistake because they were doing French fries, and a clam actually fell in there by accident into the deep fryer or the batter or whatever, and went in the fryer, and somebody tasted it and said, that's not bad. And there you go. So mistakes are,
I love it.
Mistakes are meant to happen in some cases, and that's how we get some of the things that we've got. So that's awesome. So do you do a lot of experimentation?
I do. I love experimenting with different leathers and finishes and dyes and hardwares and different ways of putting things together. At first, it's incredibly daunting because leather is a very expensive material. But
yeah,
once you've been working with it long enough, you kind of build up an inventory of remnants and scraps, and you have a little bit more free range to play around and have some fun. And I'll even buy leathers, they have a bad finish on them or something like that, so they're like marked crazy down, and nobody wants them because nobody would try to make a product out of them. It's great to be able to make mock-ups or just trials and just see how things work, especially being able to make them out of a leather. If the finish is wrong, it's still going to sit like leather sits. So you're going to be able to see like structurally how it works. So yeah, I really do like to do a lot of trial and error, and sometimes it comes with heartbreak, and sometimes it comes with a nice gin and tonic to celebrate. So it can be either way.
That's excellent. Tell me a little bit about where, other than the website, where else can we find your bags and all your leather goods?
Yeah, so my website, ophaelanleather.com. Like you said, Ophaolain. It's actually my last name. So my last name is Phelan, Phelan. And O'Phelan is the pre-anglicized version of that. So when my family was in Ireland, that's what their last name would have been before they came through Ellis Island.
Sure.
So it means the wolf. I've always been very scared of wolves. So it's kind of like my Batman moment, I guess, now. So if you walk in my studio, right above the doorway, I have this like giant wolf's head there, like gold-leafed wood. It's not like a real wolf's head or anything, but it's just something that I really loved. I wanted some kind of heritage attached to it. So that's where I went my brand, and ophaelanleather.com. I have an Instagram page, O'Phelan Leather. And as far as stores that carry my line, a lovely store in Dallas called Grange Hall, Grange Hall, Hall. They're an incredible store that sells just some of the coolest, one-of-a-kind and unique art, interior design, accessories, jewelry, very cool stuff. And they have a restaurant attached that I feel very spoiled to eat at. It's my favorite lunch in Dallas by far. And they carry my line there. And then in Houston and San Antonio, I have a lovely retail partner, Sloan Hall. It's the same store in both cities. And they also have just a bunch of very unique lines they carry there. The one in Houston is very geared towards avant-garde fashion, cool interiors, giftable items. and one-of-a-kind accessories and jewelry. And the one in San Antonio is much the same, but I think has a lot more interior leaning items. And I love decorating, so it's always a joy to be in these spaces because they're curated by just wonderful people who have a great mind for those kinds of things. And then in Round Top, Texas, I'm in a store called Rockabilly Baroness, ran by this really badass lady there. She's very cool, and it's always a good time. Round Top is just a very fun time. I'm in a store in St. Petersburg called The Work, WERK Gallery and Object Lab. That's run by two really cool guys, and they keep a bunch of awesome fine art, also jewelry, and my handbags there, and other giftable items. So I think it's funny because I like jewelry, and what I tend to find is that places that have nice handbags tend to have nice jewelry. And I've learned through my friends in the jewelry community that handbags and jewelry are number one competitors for each other in the market space.
You're
but
after
we
the
tend
same
to like each other's stuff, so
yeah.
we're
But you're
not
after
really
the same
enemies.
accessory dollar, right?
For sure.
Yeah.
And what's nice though is that most people who spend a lot of money on a nice handbag, they're going to have nice jewelry too. So it's not like they're not going to. it's
Good point.
it's an interesting market.
Yeah.
Lotsofmaps.com. Vintage, local, national, and world maps for an affordable price. 99% of our maps are $25 or less. Great as gifts. Frame them or put them under glass for your home, vacation home, or as a memory of a special place. Lotsofmaps.com.
So, Bryant, you mentioned that you were in New York Fashion Week and you had your own show and you've shown in galleries. Do you continue to do those kind of events and things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I've actually had a very interesting year for me. This March, I actually showed at Paris Fashion Week for the first time.
Oh.
It's been a dream of mine, actually, my whole life. And as I said, I never thought I would be a designer. So it's just kind of like this weird thing that I even thought. My mom and I, we used to watch this movie together. I loved it. It's called Miss Harris Goes to Paris. And they've actually just, I think, released the movie again as Miss Harris Goes to Paris. But it was about this maid who saved up her whole life to go to Paris Fashion Week and to buy a dress. And it's just a really lovely story. My mom was always very into fashion, and, you know, she did not grow up with a lot at all. I mean, her family, I think, picked cotton, you know, for a living. So they were very poor, and all of them just ended up making fantastic lives for themselves and doing so much for their communities. And she's just a superstar and, you know, kind of an idol for me. And I always wanted to show at Paris Fashion Week, you know, for my mom. So it was a big moment to be able to do that.
Yeah.
It was wild. I'm 6'5", going on 6'6". So it'd been a while since I traveled internationally, and I was not prepared for that. They keep making the planes smaller or the seats smaller. I don't know, but I loved my time there. It was just very cool, and showing there was a real honor. So that was a wonderful event, and actually, the designer Aria Kubla, she did the apparel and I did the handbags, and she's based out of Miami, and she did Art Basel there this year and showcased our collections. And Forbes actually just released a publication over their hidden gems from Art Basel 2024, and it covered us. So that was really cool to see.
Wow.
I actually just found out about it yesterday. I've been showing at New York Fashion Week for about 10 years. Actually, 10 years. This is my 10th year showing there.
Wow.
This year I showed with a really wonderful designer, now a good friend of mine, Bach Mai. Wonderful guy from Houston, actually, living in New York now, and is making serious headway in the design community. The CFDA, Council for American Fashion Designers, they have their eyes on him. He's on the official calendar for New York Fashion Week, along with the best of them. So, and he's my age. You know, we're both 35 years old. So it's really inspiring to see somebody really so passionate about it at the same age, and I'm excited to continue working with him and growing together. But that showing this September in New York got wonderful reviews. I mean, I think it was WWD that said, fashion or New York Fashion Week isn't dead. And like literally our show was the cover story for that.
Wow.
Vogue covered us, Forbes covered us, Harper's Bazaar pulled looks for their magazine for it, and just all kinds of crazy stuff. And I'm just a country boy, so it's always interesting for me to like find myself in these spaces.
Yeah.
But I'm so thankful for the people that I am working with, though, like Bach and Kato, and just because they're the most down to earth, just really kind people who are building their brands and just living in their passion. And it's a beautiful thing to see and to be involved with. And those shows like New York Fashion Week and Paris, they every designer, they probably have publicists and things like that. I do not, but it looks so glamorous to participate. It is the hardest work in the design world. The amount of work and time and effort, not only just to come up with designs, concepts, and pick models and the place to put it, and the whole aesthetic and the music and everything that goes into it. The
style.
sponsors, who you're inviting, it goes down literally to the minute the show goes on. Like, I've never done a show where things were just fine and we're just kind of waiting for the show to start. It has never been that way. It's always down to the minute, literally going, my career's over. I'll never show again. And then once it goes on, you're like, we did it. It's the biggest dichotomy in emotions. And you always take a change of clothes to New York Fashion Week or anything for backstage, because you will sweat through every article of clothing you have on working backstage. It's truly a lot of work. I think people, they really glamorize it and they think that it's going to be this lovely thing where you're praised the whole time and oh wow, you're showing here. But it's really, you're responsible for so much and so many people, because it's your brand you're putting out there, but it's also this model's career. It's also this photographer's chance. It's also this makeup artist's portfolio. It's every single bit of that. And you're the person who is responsible for making sure everyone is taken care of and it's all done right, so that everyone is represented well, including yourself. And that's a hard thing to do. And I find that people who have big egos fail miserably.
Yeah.
Because if you're just thinking about yourself, you're not going to get very far, because there are very few things, if anything, in life that you do that is truly just yours. Like, it takes a village truly to do any of these things, and they're vast endeavors. And even when I was showing at Fashion Week, my independent shows, and they were small. I'm talking like I had 15 models and maybe 8 minutes, and they would cost upwards of $120,000. And you hope you have good sponsors and stuff. And I was thankful enough to have really good sponsors like Smart Water, Monster Energy, Moet Chandon, Hennessy, just a lot of Aveda Salon, Mac Cosmetics. There are a lot of really wonderful givers in the community as well. But Bachmai, working with him this year was absolutely astounding. And you could just tell he cared so very much about his team and everyone involved. And I think that speaks to his success, because he's a team player and he's really interested in everybody's outcome. I remember when we were talking about doing handbags for a show, and he was just asking, he's like, okay, well, what do you need from this, to make this worthwhile for you? And for me, I'm probably in the fashion community considered a very relaxed person. I'm not trying to be a billionaire. I'm not trying to be the next Michael Kors. I love what I do. I just want to keep doing what I'm doing for the rest of my life. And as long as it's paying the bills, I'm good.
You sound very happy.
Yeah, I definitely am happy. I feel so thrilled just to be able to wake up and go to a job that I really love. I mean, I really love it. I love the people that I interact with, the people I work with, my clients, so many of who have become friends. Like I take it all very personally, and I love that. I really like being close like that. I feel like the bigger you get, the less you kind of have that. So I enjoy the size of my brand as it is right now. There's plenty of growth to be had, and I definitely have some of that set in front of me in 2025 and on. But I knew when I set out, I'd seen a lot of people burn very bright very quickly. And I thought, I need to enjoy this every moment that I can for the ride, because
Right.
once you're there, you're so busy. Like, are you going to really enjoy yourself as much? So I want to make sure that every moment that I have to enjoy myself, and every moment that I have to connect with people on a level that I might not be able to down the road, that I take those opportunities now, because I don't want to lose out on my humanity or my own personal journey as just a person here on this earth for the sake of what? Like a few more dollars at the end of the year. Like, I already feel like I have a great quality of life. So I just want to make sure that I don't take anything for granted.
Well, and you're very
But
thoughtful too, for thinking of the photographer and the model, and you're very thoughtful in that regard. And it's not all about you, which is really great. That's a wonderful trait.
ironically, it feeds into success in a way that I really didn't expect. And my mom always tells me, whatever you put out there, you're going to get back sevenfold, bread upon the water. So put out good things, and you're going to get good things in return. And I think this year, very particularly, last year as well, but really this year, I'm seeing so much of that come back to me. And it's startling. It really is kind of just like, oh, I don't feel like I deserve this, but I'm going to take it and run with it and do the best I can with it.
Do you have any gallery shows coming up?
I actually think I might have one coming up. It's not confirmed yet, but this coming February, I might be doing a proper gallery showing. And I love doing that. I tend to call these art accessories. I'll put frames up on the wall and put ceramic hands within the frames holding handbags. So that way it's like, you're kind of envisioning them more as a piece of art.
Mm-hmm.
And I try to really push the envelope with the artistic perspective with those pieces for those events. And I've had several people purchase them with the frame and the hand to display a piece of art in their home, which I find incredibly flattering.
That's wonderful.
I was very close with a family when I was in my undergrad, and my friend Erin, she's still one of my very best friends. Her mom had gotten cancer again, relapsed into that, and was being treated at the hospital where I was going to medical school, essentially for biostatistics epidemiology. So I got to visit her a lot, and because of that, I saw Erin there a lot, my friend. And I was doing leather work, still kind of on the side at the time. It was prior to kind of being found and all that. And I had made this bracelet. I dyed it this cognac color, I'd lined it, and I'd saddle stitched it by hand, which is a wonderful type of stitch, but a very painstaking one to do. And I brought it to her to show her at the hospital. And I remember she pointed out some flaws with it, essentially, and was like, look, you're either going to do this or you're not. She said, so if you're going to do this, you need to do it the best you can. And she said, otherwise, just focus on science and drop this. And it really got to me because she was like a sister to me, So I was just like, oh my God, I can't believe she would, talk to me like this. And she was like, her stitches are out here, da da da. And I remember like making the decision that night. I was like, she told me, she said, you're not going to make anything that you like for another 10 years. And you have to either be okay with that or not.
Wow.
And I kind of sat with that for a minute. And I went, you know what? I do not want to take everything that I have taught myself over these years and toss it in a garbage can for a career that I can visit anytime. This is something that I love, and I am going to be good at it, whether it's to prove her wrong or prove myself right. And I completely I still have both bracelets. I made a whole other one that night. Like, I stayed up all night And I took it to her the next day to show her. And I remember she just had the biggest smile on her face. And she was like, I see you've made your decision. The amount that the bracelet improved, this leather cuff bracelet, over the course of 24 hours, you would look at. If I can find them, both of them, I'll give you pictures for your site. But it looks like something that when somebody first started doing something and when they were like officially doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was literally a mindset shift. And that was it. I had the skill to do it. I had the tools to do it, the materials to do it. But I didn't do it because I hadn't fully committed. And once I had done that, it really shifted my perspective on all of this. And then kind of, my passion came into it in terms of, okay, wait, I'm going to be able to do this. So what am I doing with this? And I started taking it a lot more seriously. And that was literally 10 years ago. And I can say that now I do make things that I want. Like I'll sell things. I'm like, damn it, I was really kind of hoping to keep that, So it did take time, but yeah, now I do feel like I make very, very high quality things. And my clients shop with Hermes and Chanel and a lot of these very high-end brands, and they come to me because they want things that their friends don't have, because I only make one-of-a-kind items. So they're not going to be in a lineup of photos of women at some fantastic event and they all have the same Chanel bag or Yves Saint Laurent bag or Gucci bag or whatever. Someone's going to stand out, and I guarantee you every time it's my client, because people who look for those unique features are unique people. And they're going to stand out by their own style. But when they have that extra thing, like I said, that takes a magnifying glass to that facet of their personality, it kind of empowers them to shine, I think, a little bit brighter.
Well, and I know some artists are tortured in the sense that they're never satisfied, they're never happy, and they're always chasing the perfect piece of art.
Oh, yeah.
Do you feel that way, or do you feel like you are satisfied with the majority of the stuff that you do and you don't feel like you need to prove it to anybody?
No, I definitely share in the divine dissatisfaction that comes with being an artist. I just think that I'm a little kinder to myself than what a lot of artists can be. So I definitely catch myself in some lulls where I feel like, am I even good enough? Should I even do this? I don't deserve to be in this space. Very imposter syndrome-ish. So you have to essentially keep marching forward, and that there is no satisfaction in art, really. There's only a clear divine dissatisfaction, a blessed unrest that keeps us alive, keeps us marching forward, essentially in a way, in a pace that other people don't. And I think that's a beautiful thing, because if you're a good artist and you make something, you've learned something when you've made it, how to do something better, a technique you learned along the way, how to mix this color better, how to, whatever it is. Immediately when you finish that item, you can do better than you just did. Same thing as if you're playing tennis, you play a better tennis player. That's how you get better. In art, you're playing yourself. You are your own competition. So every time you do something, you can do a little bit better, which means at the moment you complete that item, it's not as good as you can do. So of course you're dissatisfied with it, given the last thing you do is probably the thing you're most satisfied with. But you will start to look at things, how the older they are, as being worse and worse and worse.
I would imagine that you could take that to the extreme and never be satisfied with anything you do. But I imagine you're pretty proud of some of the things that you do. And I would imagine a lot of your pieces make you happy. Maybe it's not the ultimate thing that would satisfy your itch of art, but you must still be happy about what you're doing and proud.
Yeah, for sure. I think the people who get too far into the dissatisfaction aspect of it, they either stop doing art, they become bitter, they produce the same thing over and over and over, or they just kind of begrudge their path in life in general. But if you lean more towards the side of this is a divine dissatisfaction, in that it's something that we experience that other people don't. And it's a beautiful place of inspiration and forward movement and momentum. It's a place of momentum. It's not a place of stagnation. So if you can lean into that and you're gentle with yourself, then you're able to look at what you've done and find pride. And I think a lot of artists don't take time, and a lot of people in general, in most fields, don't take time to pat themselves in the back for doing a good job,
Right.
because there's a lot of negative attributes to ego, but there are also some positive ones. And if you allow yourself the time to appreciate the things that you've done, you're going to appreciate the things going forward more, and you're going to put more heart into them, more effort into them. And other people will appreciate them more as well. And at the end of the day, if you're trying to create something that moves other people or evokes an emotion or has a point of view, then you care greatly about how it's perceived, or how it's even perceived by you. And as I'm creating things, sometimes I definitely feel like, how did I get here? Like,
Yeah.
I can't believe that I've come this far. I'm able to do this right now. Or, man, this is easier this time than it was last time. Like, I just made this really cute little crossbody. I'm so proud of it. It's such a simple design, but I was really having a hard time deciding what it needed. And once I kind of allowed myself to be open again, as I said before, childish enthusiasm and imagination is just so important. Once I allowed myself the freedom to play, I came up with a totally new concept for this bag. And I love it so much now. And I posted a little video of it, and everybody's just like freaking out about how creative it is and how interesting it is. And they've never seen anything like it.
That's
And
great.
I'm like, well, you know what? It's not because I'm some mastermind sitting behind a desk going, and this is what I'll do. It's because I let the child inside me live through my adult experience and skill set. I let myself say, okay, well, let's just play around until we get something we like. That we don't have to take this so seriously. This is, a handbag right now, and it could become something more. How are we going to make that something more? And how are we going to make that representative of ourselves and not take away from others, and just have a good time with it? And the moment you can kind of take a step back and enjoy the process, you're going to create a much happier response for yourself, and probably a better product. If you're having a good time making it, the people who see it when you're done, they're going to have a really good time too.
I want to shift a little bit just to words of advice for folks, because you don't have a traditional education that sort of pointed you towards what you're doing. Let's kind of look at it two ways. If you were to give someone some advice on just, chasing their art and wanting to do something in that regard, what kind of advice would you give them? And then second fold, any advice on someone that really wants to get involved with leather? Is there a suggestion that you might have of how they do that?
With art particularly, I think one thing that most people chasing an artistic career have a hard time with is numbers. And that's kind of multiple meanings there. One, math is your friend. If you can get down some decent geometry and algebra, it's going to help you out so much, because so much of what you do as a designer begins with math. I mean, if I'm designing a clutch, you think of the width, height, and depth of this bag. How is it going to be aesthetically pleasing? Not any ratio there is going to be beautiful. You have to really train your mind to understand how to make things happen. When you have a flap come over, how do you make sure that the magnet hits exactly where the magnet is on the front of the flap? Like, there's so many mathematical aspects of design that matter so much. And people tend to go, I'm an artist, I don't have to worry about that. No, you're an artist, you have to worry about it more than most people, to be honest. I do more math now than I did as a biostatistician. It's just a different kind of math. And as far as the numbers game goes, if you want to do what you love for the rest of your life, you've got to be able to monetize that. And it's kind of a dirty thing to say in art because people want to separate it so much. But the better I'm doing as an entrepreneur, the more freedom of expression I can have as an artist and pay for my bills and food and clothes my back. Otherwise, you're going to be working a job and doing your art. And while you're working your job, you're not doing your art. So if you can make art your job and you love it, you're going to have a lot more freedom in what you can do with your passion. And it's a hard pill to swallow, but putting a price tag, on your art, it's one of the hardest things. It really was one of the hardest things to do. But set your sights on the market that, you want to be in, what kind of, money you're hoping to make, and set your sights on developing a skill set and a niche product, or just differentiating yourself in terms of the quality that you offer, the exclusivity of the item, those kinds of things. So I would say if you're going into art, don't look at another artist and go, this is my benchmark, because it's going to be such a different journey. It always will be. It's your own journey, and you've got to make the decisions yourself. And as an artist, you're making a lot of decisions every day. What color do I use for this? What hardware color do I use for this leather, for this bag? Do I put a top handle? Do I put a strap? Do I use chain? Do I use leather? Do I use webbing? You make a ton of decisions every day. So you can get exhausted of that. But there is a business aspect to it that's hard to grasp for a lot of young artists. And I would say, if I went back, if I hadn't have done science, I probably still would not have gone to art school or fashion and design school. I would probably have gone to business school. It would have probably helped me out a lot more than if I would went to design school, because they would have taught me exactly how they do it. And not to be any kind of wake, but like you go to a design school and you have a professor that's teaching you how to make handbags, and you want to be, showing at Paris Fashion Week and have your line is in Neiman Marcus. Does that professor have a line in Neiman Marcus? Are they showing at Paris Fashion Week?
Yeah, good point.
But you're learning from them, and they're telling you what's right and wrong. But if you go to business school and you have a creative endeavor and a creative business you're wanting to grow, I guarantee you a business person can tell you how to get there. And all you have to do is be the creative mind behind it. That's what is lacking in so much good business, is the creative mind. And in the creative community, what's lacking so much is a good mind for business.
And it's not a dirty word to actually make some money doing what you're doing.
Right.
Being able to eat is a nice thing, right?
As it turns out, as a Southern guy, I like to eat.
That is not a bad thing. And tell me a little bit about suggestions of folks that want to get involved with leather. I don't know if there's specific schools that teach leather or if there are art programs that do it.
There are some schools that definitely have some leather designs up. I would highly recommend the best resource I have had in 20 years plus that I've had has been Tandy Leather. Tandy Leather is an American institution. It's been around for a long, long time. You can get anything from mild to wild there in terms of the quality of their product. You can start off at a level that's affordable. They have a very range of affordable leathers, hardwares, etc. And you can go up to some very fine things. I mean, they have Italian leathers they get there. They have all kinds of really cool things. And not only that, but their staff they keep is incredible. In almost every city that I've been to, Tandy Leather, they're so knowledgeable and so helpful and so down to earth. They also offer classes there, and you can learn some basic leatherworking with them. They're typically tied to a leather guild, which you'll find out most cities have a leather guild. And those are tied to people who do anything from hunting, fishing, saddlery, to cosplay, SCA, side of creative anachronisms. It's, anything you can imagine. Leather takes a part in so much. And Tandy Leather is a wonderful, wonderful place to get started with not only hardware, tools, leather, but also general knowledge, and to find some friends in the community that you can ask for help when you need help, or you get stuck on something, or you might need to use somebody's machine that you don't have, the funds to be able to afford yet. Leather people are different from fashion people in that fashion people believe that they should keep their silos of power and intellect to themselves. They are secret keepers. And leather people, you ask somebody how they do something, you better have an hour to sit down and let them explain it, because they will tell you every way. They'll make a video. They're the nicest people. They're welcoming. I can't speak highly enough about them, but my local Tandy Leather just has the best people. Lance and Cher and Jess and all the people who have been there before. They're just wonderful. And one of the ladies, Cher, who's there right now, she was there when I was 16 and I made my first leather bag. And they took a picture of me with my leather bag I made. And somewhere in the interwebs of Tandy Leather, there is a picture of 16-year-old Bryant with his first leather bag there for sure.
That's an excellent resource. I love it. The fact that you've got educational classes right in the store that sells the goods that you're interested in. That's terrific. Love that. Tandy Leather. Yeah. Excellent.
And they're everywhere.
So Bryant Phelan of Phelan Handbags, ophelan.com. Thank you so much for joining us on Occupations and bringing your knowledge of handbags, fashion, leather, all kinds of stuff, art, to our table. We really do appreciate you coming today.
Hey, absolutely my pleasure. And thank you for having me on. I'm so happy that you find my profession interesting, and I'm happy to share about it.
Well, and we just got a nice education. I know I did in something I know nothing about. So that's the whole point of this thing. So thanks again. Join us again for another episode of Occupations, the podcast, coming soon.
Occupations has been brought to you by lotsofmaps.com. Please follow Occupations the podcast on Facebook and Instagram to find information about our next episode or to see what past episodes are available.